Hi and welcome to week 5 for the Hyper Juken Alpha Block Set 1 The New Challenges preview season. Our final week of previews before the Kickstarter launches. Over the past few weeks we've seen fighter cards, Carter cards and attack cards. All exciting stuff. For this final week we're going to look at each fighter's second Carter, but we're also going to be covering some new territory, block and tactic cards. Today has a lot of explaining to do, so get ready for a bit of a longer preview. Let's get started with Lucy's Key Flow Form 2. I mentioned in Lucy's second video that Lucy has a couple of cards that gain her additional key, one of which could be shuffled back into her arsenal. Here's the thing, you already saw that card. It was Energetic Kick. Key Flow Form 2 can shuffle it back into your arsenal, with the same condition as Key Flow Form 1. When you gain key due to an effect, Key Flow Form 2 allows you to target up to 2 attack cards in your exhaust and shuffle them into your arsenal. Typically, it'll be a level 2 attack or burst power strike and energetic kick. Something hard hitting and a way to gain additional key. Although, if you have enough key to keep the momentum going and want those level 2 attacks to close out the game, just going for 2 level 2 attacks isn't the worst option. Being able to recur some big, impactful attacks. Burst Takedown in particular. Your opponent can't keep paying 2 key. Eventually, they'll take a 6 to 8 power speed. Key Flow Form 2 isn't a card for an attrition game. Energetic Kick's hit effect is only a net 1 to your arsenal overall. But what it does give you is the ability to use your most favoured attacks multiple times, and if Energetic Kick keeps hitting, indefinitely. If your game plan centers around some really specific attacks, or you need them to break through your opponent's defensive maneuvers, Key Flow Form 2 really helps with that. Let's look at our first block and the first of the cycle of breaker cards in the new challenges, Unwavering Grit. Block cards are normally limit 12 per arsenal and have an effect when used to block an attack, a BLK effect. Blocks also have a super type exclusive to them in breaker cards. Breaker cards are special in that their BRKR effects, their breaker effects, are only triggered when they are revealed from the top of your arsenal as combat damage from an attack. All cards in the Unwavering cycle prevent the next 3 combat damage from your opponent's current attack and remove themselves from the game. In addition to this, they all have an effect like Unwavering Grit here, which raises your Hyper 2. The new challenges only includes 1 playset of breakers per arsenal, but this is akin to having an additional 12 cards in your arsenal if they all manage to prevent 3 combat damage each. If you decide to make your own decks, it's an additional 24, and over the course of the first block, if you make your own decks, you can have your full block lineup be all breaker cards, an additional 36 cards for a theoretical 76 card arsenal. However, in doing that, you lose blocks that do something when you block with them, some of which might have more benefits than breaker cards. It's not like breaker cards can always save you either. As for Unwavering Grit in particular, it's a good comeback card, like all of the Unwavering cycle. No additional hoops to jump through for its effect, the 2 Hyper happens regardless, and since Lucy can't get it back into her arsenal yet, 2 Hyper can either just draw Lucy a card or put her into Hyper form, getting her back on her feet and ready to kick butt. So let's move to the final card of today, our first tactic card, first buff and first card with signature. But a little bit about tactics first. Tactics are used to change the course of the fight and have either a setup effect used during your prepare phase after you draw, an attack effect used in place of an attack, or a trigger effect used when their condition is met. In addition to using them from your hand, tactics can also be set face down during your prepare phase. When you wish to use them from set, you must discard 1 card from your hand. The conditions of their use must be the same. Set up during prepare phase, act as an action, and trigger when the condition is met. Let's move over to how signature works. Signature is both a golden rule and an attribute keyword. Golden rules affect corner and arsenal construction. Cards with signature can only be packed by the character named in the signature keyword. In the case of the most excitable girl, Lucy, it has signature, Lucy, in the reminder text can only be packed by Lucy. The final first for the most excitable girl is that it's our first card with 2 activation conditions. It can be used either as a setup effect during your prepare phase or as an act effect during combat. With all of that out of the way, as a tactic, the most excitable girl raises Lucy's hyper 2. If you have a copy in play as a buff, draws a card. Then it has status effect. As a buff, the most excitable girl really is the cornerstone of what makes Lucy so fast. It reduces her hyper meter to 6. I've been alluding to just how fast Lucy is to achieve hyper form since I first showed her. This is the full picture. Initiate combat, 2 hyper. The most excitable girl, 4 hyper. Now you just need 2 more, which is astoundingly easy to do. There are blocks that give you 2 hyper, attacks that give you 1 or 2, key flow form 1, unwavering grit. An additional copy of the most excitable girl will also do the trick. That additional copy cycles itself too, so you're not down a card after the first one. Takes away from the arsenal, but you gain 2 hyper. Regardless, with the most excitable girl, you are getting to hyper Lucy that turn, unless your opponent lowers your hyper or neutralizes the most excitable girl. But wait, there's more! It's still relevant for hyper Lucy. Only 6 hyper to draw 1. While you don't get 2 hyper for initiating combat, it's not that hard to hit 6 hyper as hyper Lucy either. More momentum. I do need to give you 1 ruling on the most excitable girl as a buff though. If your hyper is 6+ when the most excitable girl becomes a buff, you will be considered to have raised your hyper to max. So both hyper transformation and hyper Lucy's trigger effects conditions are met. This will come up from time to time. Thanks for watching. Come back next time when we look at Elatona's second Carter and signature card. Hi and welcome to the second video of the final week of previews for Hyper Juken Alpha Block Set 1, the new challenges. Last time was a bit long since I needed to cover how blocks, breakers, tactics, and cards with signature all work. Today should be a bit smoother. Let's start with Elatona's Adaptive Form 1. Adaptive Form 1 really does live up to the name. It can be absolutely anything. For Elatono, it's a card we'll be talking about at the end of the day. For Lucy, it's the most excitable girl. As the card pool develops, the amount of things Adaptive Form 1 can be just grows and grows. As a setup, so during your prepare phase after you draw, if you have no buffs in play, search your arsenal for a card that can become a buff with a continuous effect and place it into play as a buff. If you need a refresher, look back to last week's yellow spoiler with Retribution Form 1 on how cards with a secondary typing function. Always shuffle your arsenal after it's searched. It's a game rule. The key to Adaptive Form 1 is that it's really any buff you want it to be. It's not a card in and of itself. But wait, there's more. If the buff is neutralized by an effect, so long as you have an additional copy of that card still in your arsenal, you can replace it. If you pack a few different buffs, you can choose the one that's most advantageous to you in that matchup. Adaptive Form 1 is an incredibly versatile card whose full potential won't be seen for years to come. Unwavering Resolve is Elatono's Unwavering Breaker card and is quite different to Lucy's Unwavering Grit, despite the high level of similarities due to being a cycle of cards. Unwavering Resolve has mostly the same text. When revealed as combat damage, prevent the next 3 combat damage that your opponent's current attack would inflict, except the actual effect is quite different. It lowers your opponent's hyper 2, meaning it's a double hit to their momentum. Not only does their attack inflict less damage, they're also kept back from hyperform, effects triggered by max hyper, and hyper attacks. This can really put a damper on some decks, as hyper isn't the easiest thing for them to gain in the first place. You've probably stopped a mirror match Elatono or Taichi from even using their hyper attack at all if enough of these are hit as combat damage, and have really annoyed Lucy. The Undying Hero is Elatono's signature tactic, what you will search for with Adaptive Form 1, and yet another card that makes Forceful Ki Blast a key component in Elatono's arsenal. Setup or act, heal 2. If you have the Undying Hero in play as a buff, draw 1. Heal 2 is pretty good for recovery from a level 0 attack, though when you have a copy in play as a buff, it's really heal 1 overall since you draw a card, except it's not. As a buff, whenever you heal a specific value or target cards in your exhaust to heal, increase that value by 1. So additional copies are now heal 3, draw 1, meaning you recovered from a level 0 attack for nothing. And there are a few other cards here and there that just work like that now. Instead of being a card here, a card there, they're healing the same as a level 0 attack. But it gets better. Elattona's effect, same deal. If a level 1 attack goes through, 6 cards swing, 4 to the opponent, hit heal 2. If it's a level 2, 8 cards. But then there is Forceful Ki Blast. Heal 2, hit heal 2, hit heal 2. If it hits, 10 cards swing, 3 hyper. It actually heals more than it inflicts damage. 3 hyper, 7 card swing on base value, worth blocking. 3 hyper, 10 card swing. Your opponent wants that going through even less than a level 2 attack in most cases. Typically, unless you get your opponent completely unawares, don't count on Forceful Ki Blast hitting. Just consider it a tactic you need to pay 1 key for that heals 2 and drains a block from your opponent's hand. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get it to stick though. Thanks for watching. Next week is our final set of previews, Taichi's second Carter and his signature tactic. Hi and welcome to the final preview video for Hyper Juken Alpha Block Set 1, the new challenges. Next week the Kickstarter is launched, but today let's focus on Taichi, starting with his opportunistic Form 1. Our final Carter for this set is Yellow's opportunistic Form 1. We've seen Red shuffle attacks back into the arsenal, we've seen Blue heal the exhaust. This is how Yellow gets cards back. As an act effect, you can discard a tactic card to target any level 1 attack with an original hit effect in your exhaust, then pay its cost and perform it. However, when it resolves, if it would be sent to your key pool, it is sent back to your exhaust instead. The purpose of opportunistic Form 1 is to both reuse hit effects and try to get cards that can become debuffs to stick. The hit effect by itself might be worth the overall -1 key, but the real strength lies in those debuffs. If they hit, they don't go to the key pool anyway, so you don't lose anything. They just become a debuff and they've done their job. The tactic cost is also transformative itself, figuratively. Maybe the condition is a little too hard to meet, or in the case of the signature tactics from the new challenges, getting the debuffs back is worth more than the draw 1. The tactic becomes an attack, more or less. You aren't stuck with a dead card. Later on, as the card pool expands, you might not even want to set tactic cards because the out in opportunistic Form 1 is just a much better option for your game plan. Opportunistic Form 1 is a very versatile card with a very bright future. The final card in the Unwavering cycle, Unwavering Determination, allows you to choose what it is. With the same base effect as the other Unwavering cards, Breaker, prevent the next 3 combat damage your opponent's current attack would inflict, and remove it from the game. Its actual effect is either Grits raise your Hyper 2, or lower your opponent's Hyper 2. This choice is something of a running theme in Yellow as a whole. Help yourself or hinder your opponent. What you choose will be determined by the state of the board. If you can prevent your opponent from reaching max Hyper, that's the way to go. If they're still pretty far from it and they aren't raising their Hyper at blistering speeds, raise yours. This is part of why Yellow is a bit more advanced. You need to make the right call. A lot of things can depend on it. Our final preview overall is our final signature card, Taichi's Demon of the Wind. The tactics effect is the same as Lucy's The Most Excitable Girl. Set up or act, raise your Hyper 2. If you have the Demon of the Wind in play as a buff, draw 1. Taichi has a bit of a hard time gaining Hyper as it's largely reliant on how your opponent interacts with you. So a +2 Hyper on a card that cycles itself is actually better than it looks. Though there are definitely times where you will want to discard additional copies for opportunistic Form 1, to keep secured attack momentum. Try to force the right debuff into play. Then the Demon of the Wind becomes a buff. As of now, the only way yellow can get buffs is via signature cards. As a buff, the Demon of the Wind turns all of your level 1 attacks with an original hit effect into a microcosm of his Demon Wind / Hyper attack. When they are blocked by a block card, inflict effect damage to your opponent equal to the number of copies your opponent has of that card in their remove pile. Like Demon Wind /, it's not really much to start with, but it can really add up over time, especially in combination with other cards we'll see as the game grows. You can land your opponent in a similar situation to Demon Wind / itself. They could let it hit, take the damage, let you get the hit effect, maybe get a breaker effect themselves, but if they block through effects and other sources of damage as a consequence of blocking, take around the same amount of damage anyway. Thanks for watching! This concludes the preview season for Hyper Juken Alpha Block Set 1 The New Challenges. Next week is a how to play video and we start the Kickstarter for Hyper Juken. During August, look to Awesome Card Games and Photo Games for additional spoilers. Links are in the description.